Welcome to Then and Now, a podcast by the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. We study change in order to make change, linking knowledge of the past to the quest for a better future. Every other week, we examine the most pressing issues of the day through a historical lens, helping us understand what happened then and what that means for us now.
Hello, this is David Myers, host of Then and Now, which is sponsored by the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. Today, I'm pleased to welcome to the program Dr. Ben Zdencanovic, who is a familiar voice on the podcast as a frequent co-host. Ben has been the Luskin Center's postdoctoral associate for the past 3 years and is a historian of 20th century U.S. political and diplomatic history. Ben and I will be discussing our joint work on a Luskin Center report entitled The Challenge to University Autonomy in an Illiberal Age, Historical and Comparative Perspectives. The report arises at a time of unprecedented threat to higher education institutions in the United States posed by the federal government. Our report discusses historical case studies from the United States in which universities were subjected to external pressures, as well as present-day examples of foreign universities that have come under significant attack from their own governments. In today's conversation, we'll share some of our research before concluding with some recommended strategies for navigating our way out of the current moment. Hi, Ben. Welcome to Then and Now.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Well, it's really great to have you. You've hosted episodes of Then and Now. I've hosted episodes of Then and Now, but we've never hosted one another. So here we are.
We have not.
So what we're going to talk about today is some of the work that you've done and you and I have done together related to universities in the United States, and particularly to the way in which universities have faced pressure, both internally and externally, and how they've responded. It's important to note that the report about which we're going to speak in just a little bit emerged out of a larger Luskin Center for History and Policy research project on university responses to crisis. And that larger undertaking was prompted by the events that followed October 7th, 2023, and particularly the spring of 2024, and particularly the tragic events that occurred between April 30th, 2024 and May 2nd, 2024, when the pro-Palestine encampment was attacked by a group of violent thugs, and then the next day the police took down the encampment. Those events prompted a great deal of concern and dismay on our campus about what had gone down, the sequence in which violent protesters from outside of the university were able to attack seemingly with impunity the encampment, and then the next day the encampment was taken down. And in the wake of that, we at the Luskin Center thought it might make sense to just explore the historical context in which universities have responded to crises that have occurred in their midst. And you were part of that ongoing research project. I wonder if you want to just say a word about what you took on as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this project looked at various moments in the history of UCLA and moments of internal crisis. One particular moment that my sort of sub-team was looking at was the 1960s and 1970s, the era of Vietnam protests, protests for ethnic studies, protests against university complicity in the military-industrial complex, in the Cold War, Vietnam War, national security state. So we did quite a bit of archival research in the internal archives of UCLA, looking at how at various points both the Board of Regents of the University of California and the UCLA administration itself responded to, managed, was sort of understanding the crisis of student protests, student unrest, with an eye towards better understanding the more recent university response to the pro-Palestine protests, and hopefully with a guide towards how universities can better respond to similar crises in the future.
Right. I mean, it's as we saw in the spring 2024 case that prompted our larger study. Um, University administrators are trying to navigate the shoals of campus life by ensuring safety as much as they can while upholding the rights that are so essential to the operation of the university, the right to free expression, the right to free inquiry. And that balance is struck differently at different points in time. And people are fiercely critical of the way in which that balance was struck in the wake of the takedown of the encampment in 2024. It turns out people have been very critical of university administrators over the course of decades. And you've chronicled a number of interesting case studies that reveal cases in which university administrators, for example, erred on the side of national security or the perceived physical security of the campus over the principles of the right to free expression and inquiry. I'm wondering if in the course of your study of this phenomenon, you encountered examples of what you thought were enlightened university responses to crisis.
Yeah, so our research on UCLA and the UC system in the 1960s began by looking at the free speech crisis, which originated at the University of Berkeley, but also spread to the other UC campuses, including UCLA. So the university response to that, especially at UCLA, was really extraordinarily tolerant. University administrators designated free speech areas, really sort of codified in very clear terms the ways that students could express free speech, could invite controversial speakers to campus. A little bit later on in the course of the 1960s, during the Vietnam War protests, one interesting thing that our team found in our archival research was an internal report on violence on university campuses from UCLA, which to the credit of the administration, really included a lot of student voices, student participation. That said, there were also moments in the 1960s where there were certainly less enlightened responses. A very prominent example of that, quite a famous or infamous one, is the case of Angela Davis, who was a young Black woman, just about 26 years old. She was a philosopher, politically radical, hired at UCLA in 1969 by the philosophy department as a visiting assistant professor. She was also a Communist Party member, which drew the ire of Governor Ronald Reagan, who really based a lot of his governorship on trying to suppress student protests and trying to sort of root out what he perceived as subversive and radical activity within the UC system. So Reagan really pushed the Board of Regents of the University of California to fire Angela Davis, which became a real flashpoint in the history of free expression and free speech and academic freedom at UCLA and also in the broader university system in the United States. But in
this case,
yes.
It turns out that Reagan had to act against the judgment and actions of UCLA Chancellor Chuck Young, who was committed to reappointing Angela Davis. So this is an example in which we see a university administrator standing up to political pressure, even if the ultimate outcome did not go in his direction. But
Yeah, that's yeah.
this was an example, and somewhat rare example, of an administrator bucking the political trend in order to make
Yeah,
a point.
yeah, I think so, and you see that throughout the 1960s of especially UCLA President Charles Young, really standing up to a lot of the pressure coming from the Reagan governorship and the Board of Regents on free speech at UCLA. Absolutely.
Right. So we've been engaged at the Luskin Center in this long-term project on the university and its response to crisis. Um, Prompted by October 7th and by all of the activism and protest, allegations of anti-Semitism, of Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian discrimination, that made our campus and so many others flashpoints of controversy around the country. But you and I decided to produce a smaller report in the wake of the more recent efforts by the Trump administration to extract large sums of money from universities uh, as a result of their alleging rampant anti-Semitism, and essentially a commitment to a political ideology of wokeism on college campuses, commitment to DEI, commitment to the rights of trans people. These are the main elements of the Department of Justice's and the Trump administration more generally assault on institutions from east to west, from Harvard to UCLA. So we decided, let's take a look at um, external pressures to universities, and the way in which universities have responded. And the result is a report that is now coming out through the Luskin Center for History and Policy. And in it, there are three parts. One deals with a number of historical case studies from the United States. The second part deals with a number of contemporary international case studies about external pressure faced by universities. And the third part is a series of recommendations about how we might navigate our way out of this. So do you want to just briefly summarize what you took on in the first part?
Yes, so we traced external pressures, political pressure on universities going back to the 1890s. An early example that we found was at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. There was an economist at UW-Madison named Richard T. Ely. He was a founding member of the American Economic Association, very prominent economist of the time. He was also a very outspoken progressive in terms of labor, wealth inequality, et cetera. He was kind of sympathetic to socialism and left causes, and much like the Davis case in the 1960s, the Board of Regents was pressured by state political actors to remove Ely from his teaching position. And the University of Wisconsin, the Board of Regents, really pushed back on this as well, and they articulated what came to be known as the Wisconsin idea, which is that quote, the investigator should be absolutely free to follow the indications of truth wherever they may lead, and furthermore that the university should ever encourage the continual and fearless sifting and winnowing by which alone the truth can be found. And this phrase, sifting and winnowing, kind of became a sort of byword for academic freedom in subsequent eras. So in this early test of academic freedom, the Wisconsin Regents really delivered kind of a crucial precedent in protecting academic freedom from politicized external pressure. It was a very different story a little bit later on in World War I, when the U.S. government was really cracking down on dissent, on subversion, and the universities were really at the center of this. This is the time of the famous Espionage and Sedition Acts of 1917 and 1918, which really targeted, quote, enemy aliens and treasonous material, critical material of the U.S. government and the war aims in World War I, and many thousands of political radicals and progressives and socialists and pacifists were prosecuted legally under these laws. And that included many university professors. Dozens were dismissed from their posts around the country for alleged pro-German or pacifist sympathies. Another economist, Scott Nearing, is one of the most commonly cited examples of that. He lost tenure or he was denied tenure at Penn, went on to the University of Toledo, where he was actually arrested for his pro-pacifist views. He was eventually acquitted, but it really marked the end of his academic career. Also in this era, the American Association of University Professors, or AAUP, was founded in 1915 as one of many sort of professional associations that was being founded in that era, and the AAUP still exists to this day. And it was really the first organization that really set out, codified a set of principles protecting academic freedom, sort of laying out what the tenure system should be in its modern form. But also later on in World War I, even the AAUP began to back away from its commitments to academic freedom. In 1918, it came out explicitly to say that academics should shy away, should refrain from making any kind of anti-war or in anti-government statements or taking any kind of pacifist position. In 1918, it said, some things are just at present vastly more important than academic freedom. So we see even in an organization that was explicitly founded with the commitment to academic freedom, kind of rolling back some of those protections during the First World War.
How differing political contexts give different valences to such terms. In the second part of the study, we begin by talking about universities under Nazi and fascist control in Europe in the interwar period up to, and then of course, beginning in 1933. But even before then, as sort of fascist political actors are beginning to gain traction throughout Europe. And one of the things that is so striking is how the universities were perceived to be such an important site of control. One of the first acts that the Nazi Party undertook after Hitler came to power in January 1933 was to exclude non-Aryans from the university and civil service, April 7th, 1933. And from that point forward, there was an ongoing process of exclusion of non-Aryans, chiefly Jews, and an attempt to impose Nazi political ideology on every corner of the university, in personnel decisions, in the selection of administrators, and in curriculum. And those three areas, once again, have become the objects of control that illiberal authoritarians in contemporary Europe have set their sights on. Particularly, we look at the case in the report of Hungary and Turkey, as well as India. And we note that in Viktor Orban's Hungary, there's been a concerted attempt over the last 8 years or so to exercise control of universities by determining what subjects could be taught. For example, gender studies is not a legitimate subject according to Hungarian law. Who should be in control of the universities? Whether universities in fact should be allowed to exist on Hungarian soil. as in the case of the Central European University. And we see a similar playbook being deployed in India under the regime of Prime Minister Modi, who is intent on imposing the ideals of his BJP party on Indian universities and setting up new mechanisms by which governments can control academic and administrative appointments. And our third international case study is Turkey, where since 2016, the dictatorial president Erdogan has fired thousands of academics and deans, replaced them with his people, and sought to really submit the university to his political control. These examples seem now hauntingly close to our own world in the United States. And one of the things with which we conclude this report that we think is of value is thinking about what should we do, what has been learned in the past, what has been learned in response to what's going on in Europe or has been over the last decade or so. And we propose at the end of this series of recommendations or strategies to navigate our way in this very tricky time.
One of our recommendations is really to put some pressure on state governments. I think that it's become clear that the federal system is explicitly targeting the university system. So I think state governments is really a crucial bulwark in terms of filling the gap of a lot of the federal funding that universities have lost. I think something else that is really crucial right now is to restore some public confidence in the university system. So that's been eroding for quite some time now. Polling and studies have really shown a dramatic loss of faith in the university system and in the American public over the past 10 to 20 years. Universities are increasingly seen as sort of bastions of elitism. People are really sort of questioning the value of the four-year degree and increasingly questioning the value of a liberal arts education. And I think that any defense of the university system against the attacks that we're seeing right now are really going to hinge very, very heavily on mobilizing a much broader base of public support than they have at present.
Yeah, and amongst the other things that we suggest is that we, in addition to mobilizing state legislatures to protect academic freedom and to redouble their commitment to universities at a time when the federal government is withdrawing its support, we have to call upon our philanthropic partners to recommit to uphold the values of scholarly innovation and free inquiry that have made the University of California such an incredible, an extraordinary institution of higher education, really in modern history. And we think that this is a moment in time when we absolutely must build relationships with other universities in our state, across the country, and internationally to build a large coalition to uphold the values of free inquiry and really the value of viewpoint diversity that is under siege now, the very value that the Trump administration claims to uphold. Really what it seems to me they're looking for is viewpoint uniformity. And we at the university are very committed. Many of us are very committed to allowing for a wide and open range of views to be heard in the name of creating that requisite friction that allows for the production of knowledge, which ultimately serves society. That's our mission at the University of California. That's our mission as scholars. And now is a time to really think creatively, and to forge coalitions with allies, old and new, likely partners and less likely partners, in order to protect one of our state's greatest treasures, the University of California. If listeners are more interested in hearing about these historical examples or some of our recommendations, please look on our website, that is, say, the Luskin Center website, for the new report that has come out called The Challenge to University Autonomy in an Illiberal Era, Historical and Comparative Perspectives. Dr. Ben Zdencanovic was the lead author. I helped out. And should you have any feedback or questions about it, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Ben, as always, it's good to be with you. It's good to talk to you. It's great to have this opportunity to sit down on Then and Now together with you. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was it's a pleasure to work on this with you, David, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for listening to Then and Now, a podcast by the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. You can learn more about our work or share your thoughts with us at our website, luskincenter.history.ucla.edu. Our show is produced by David Myers and Rosalind Campbell, with original music by Daniel Reichman. Special thanks to the UCLA History Department for its support, and thanks to you for listening.